But let me just ask this. It seems to me, how does the same consistent character of Jesus come through in all four biographies that were written in different parts of the ancient world? So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are in different places when they write their Gospels. How does all this come through if Jesus was a legend or each writer heard different invented stories about Jesus?
Well, I think you would agree that Mark is a primary source for Luke and Matthew, right?
He might be a primary source or one of the sources. But if you look at Luke, Luke has a lot of material that is not found in Mark.
And some of that may be either Matthew borrowed from Luke or they both borrowed from a Q source. I mean, to say that they pulled from a consistent oral tradition. So one of the things you mentioned in your book, you mentioned Batman when he came out in Detective Comics. When he started out, Batman fired guns and used to kill people. You know, that was a thing. And then over the decades, the Batman that we know and love emerged. And similar with Superman. When Superman first came out in Action Comics, he couldn't fly. He wasn't bulletproof. You know, all those things. These were characteristics that in the first couple decades of these characters' lives, the writers figured out what the audiences liked and what they didn't like. And I thought that was a great analogy for what I think happened with the Jesus stories. The Jesus stories got a couple of decades of honing, you know, amongst his followers. And that, for me, perfectly adequately explains why you get a consistent nature combined with what I think are clear literary dependencies. Even John, most, like Keener and others, forgive me if it's not Keener, maybe it's Allison, you know, John seems to have had a copy of Mark available to him, whether or not he directly used it. So, you know, for me, those literary dependencies are easily enough to say he's roughly consistent.
Well, yeah, he is consistent, but as I say, they're all written in different areas by different people who are writing to different audiences. You know, Matthew's writing more to the Jewish audience, as you know, whereas Luke is writing to a Roman audience. I mean, they're writing to different people, and they all seem to have a consistent character of Jesus, even though there are different stories about Jesus in those four different Gospels. And it seems to me, what's more likely, that this character Jesus actually existed and said these things, or these four different writers in different parts of the ancient world somehow came up with this same amazing character through some sort of scrambling legendary
it's in
development.
The same way Matt Reeves and Tim Burton, and why am I blanking on the other trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, those directors all came up with incredibly different Batman stories. But yet the core of
right, but they're fiction,
I think the stories about Jesus are fictional. Like, if you look at it that way.
Wait. So you're saying the most influential human being in history never existed?
No, I think Jesus, I will fight anyone. I think Jesus existed, but I think that the stories that emerged about him in the decades later, again, I cannot emphasize enough how much Luke and Matthew just blatantly copied Mark. Like, that's, if you had a copy of Mark with you, it's very unsurprising.
Well, can we come back to this after a quick break, and we'll see how Frank responds to this, because I think we're getting to some interesting territory here as to the Jesus story itself, and it's important we dig into this a bit more.